A team of ex-Apple, Nest, and Tesla engineers are betting that the thing holding heat pumps back was never the engineering. It was that they are ugly, loud, and quit on when you most need them when it is cold. Their company, the California-based Quilt, has built a ductless system with a paintable front panel that blends into the wall. It adds sensors that stop heating rooms nobody is in and holds around 90% of its rated capacity at 13 degrees below zero. Put together, they claim it can cut a home's heating bill by up to 40%, while looking like something you would choose rather than hide. We are going to trace the heat through the system, get into the radar trick behind those savings, and find out whether design is really the missing piece in getting homes off gas. Let's dive in. Homes are a bigger climate problem than most people realize. Around 20% of US greenhouse gas emissions come from houses, and the single largest source is burning fossil fuels for heat. Space heating and cooling are also the biggest line on the average energy bill. In colder regions, they eat up a third to a half of what a home spends each year. The fix is well understood. A heat pump moves heat instead of burning fuel, which makes it 3 to 4 times more efficient than a gas furnace. Swap one in, and both the bills and the emissions drop. So the technology itself is not really in question. What stops people is everything around the technology. A standard ductless mini-split hangs a bulky plastic head on your wall, 10 to 13 inches tall, that clashes with every room it lands in. The older units get loud, especially on a cold night when they are working hardest. Many of them also lose a chunk of their output once the temperature drops below freezing. At that point, they lean on backup electric resistance heat, which burns through electricity to make up the gap. That last problem matters most, where heating matters most. A heat pump that fades in the cold is exactly the wrong tool for a hard winter. That is the reputation the whole category has spent years trying to shake. Sleek design, quiet running, and real cold weather output are the 3 problems Quilt set out to solve at once. The company was founded in 2022 in Redwood City, California, by Paul Lambert, Matthew Knoll, and Bill Key, who came out of Apple, Nest, and Tesla. It launched its first product in May 2024 and has raised about $62 million in venture funding to date. The pitch from the start was to treat a heat pump less like an appliance and more like a connected device, the way Nest once did with the thermostat. The system comes in 4 parts. There is the indoor unit, the outdoor unit, a small smart thermostat called the dial, and a phone app. The indoor head is the piece you notice, or rather, the piece you are meant to not notice. It stands under 8 inches tall. You can spec it with a real oak veneer, or a plain front that you paint or wallpaper to match the wall behind it. The idea is a mini split that disappears. Underneath the styling, the engineering is genuine. Quilt runs a variable speed compressor, which means it ramps its output up and down to match what the room actually needs. That is different from an older single-speed unit that slams on and off. The steady modulation is a big part of how it stays quiet, with the indoor unit running as low as 27 decibels, which Quilt describes as quieter than rainfall. The refrigerant is R32, which carries roughly 1/3 the global warming impact of the R410A, still common in older systems. It comes pre-charged from the factory, so the installer does not have to weigh in refrigerant by hand on site. Then there is the part that drives the savings. Every indoor unit carries a millimeter wave radar sensor in a module mounted below it. Most heat pumps that bother with occupancy use a basic infrared motion sensor. That kind wrongly decides a room is empty the moment you sit still to watch TV or fall asleep. The radar does not make that mistake. It reads the room as present or empty even when nobody is moving, and it never forms an actual image, so there is no camera in your home. The software uses that signal to run a feature Quilt calls auto away. When a room sits empty, the system quietly eases off heating or cooling it, then brings it back to your setting when you walk in. Across a home where rooms sit unused for half the day, that adds up. The whole thing is controlled through the dial or the app. That gives you room by room set points and energy data broken down by the hour and by the room. Because the hardware is software defined, it can also get better after it is installed. In late 2024, Quilt pushed an over-the-air update to units already on people's walls. It lifted their heating and cooling capacity by more than 20% overnight for free. On the numbers, the 2-zone system hits a SEER 2 cooling efficiency of 25, among the highest in the ductless category, with a heating rating to match. It holds full heating capacity down to 5 below zero, and about 90% of it down to 13 below. That covers the coldest it typically gets across most of the country. Against a conventional ductless mini-split, the gap is less about raw thermodynamics and more about everything bolted around it. A typical mini-split lands somewhere between a SEER 2 of 15 and 22, so Quilt's 25 genuinely pulls ahead on efficiency. But the older units are also cheaper to buy, and that is the trade running underneath this whole comparison. Where Quilt separates itself is the combination an incumbent cannot easily match. The occupancy sensing, the quiet variable speed running, the design, and the software updates are not features a 15-year-old platform can add with a new remote. A standard mini-split with a handheld infrared controller keeps heating an empty room until you tell it not to. Quilt simply stops, and that is where a meaningful slice of the claimed savings comes from. It is worth being clear-eyed about that 40% figure though, because it is Quilt's own number, not an independent one. How much you actually save depends on what you are replacing, how your home is laid out, and how often your rooms sit empty. The efficiency ratings are third-party certified by AHRI. The bill savings are a projection on top of them. There is also the cruder option at the bottom of the market. A window air conditioner runs a few $100s and only handles summer. It blocks the window, leaks cooled air around the frame, runs loud, and does nothing for heat. It solves half the problem badly, which is a different thing from solving the whole problem well. The timing comes down to the grid and to where home heating sits on it. Electricity demand in the US is climbing after years of sitting flat. It is pushed up by data centers, new factories, and the steady electrification of cars and buildings. Planners expect peak demand to grow by tens of gigawatts over the next few years. As more homes heat with electricity instead of gas, the strain lands hardest in winter, exactly when a fading heat pump would be calling on backup resistance heat. That is the real argument for a cold climate machine right now. A heat pump holding 90% of its output at 13 below is not just warmer for the homeowner. It keeps the household off the resistance heat crutch that spikes demand across a whole region during a cold snap. Multiply that across millions of homes, and the difference shows up at the level of the grid itself. The money has lined up behind the same shift. In the US, the Inflation Reduction Act offers tax credits and rebates for Energy Star cold climate heat pumps, the category Quilt qualifies for. Where those incentives apply, the upfront gap against a cheaper mini-split narrows, and the efficiency advantage starts paying it back from the first winter. For all that, Quilt has real ground to cover, and the first obstacle is one common to every smart home company before it. Hardware in a house has to keep working for 10 to 15 years. The companies building connected hardware do not always last that long. The graveyard is crowded, from smart home control startups that folded to devices left stranded when a company switched off the servers behind them. A heat pump that leans on the cloud inherits that risk. If Quilt ever went dark, the worry is whether the unit on your wall keeps heating your house or quietly turns into an expensive manual dial. What would settle it is the system holding its core functions locally through open standards, so the hardware keeps running whatever happens to the company. Quilt style already speaks thread and matter, the common smart home protocols. That is a step in the right direction rather than a finished guarantee. The second challenge is the people who actually install these things. The HVAC trade runs on local contractors, and they are cautious by nature. Most real-world failures come not from a bad compressor, but from a sloppy install. The wrong refrigerant charge, unbalanced airflow, a wiring mistake. A risk-averse installer tends to reach for the familiar single-speed system they have fitted 100 times. For Quilt to grow, it has to build and train a certified installer network. It also has to use its own onboard sensors to catch a bad install before it becomes a callback. That is slow, ground-level work, not something a software update fixes. And then there is price. Quilt sits at the premium end, and a cheaper mini-split will always undercut it on the sticker. The case rests on the efficiency, the savings, and the incentives closing that gap over years. That asks a homeowner to weigh the long view against the number on day one. The direction of travel, though, is clearly towards scale. By the end of 2025, Quilt had installed close to 1,000 units across 16 US states and 5 Canadian provinces, and closed a $20 million round to push that footprint wider. In June 2026, it crossed into the Canadian market properly, its first move outside the US. It is also widening the product itself. Early on, one outdoor unit powered 2 indoor heads, which capped how big a home it suited. A newer 3-zone outdoor unit now runs 3 rooms off a single box, or up to 6 rooms off 2. That opens the door to whole home installs without cluttering the yard with hardware. To smooth the upfront cost in Canada, the company has added a subscription option, which turns a large one-time bill into a monthly payment. If you are watching this and wondering when you can get one, the honest answer is that you already can. It goes in through Quilt's certified installers as long as you are in a covered region and the budget stretches. The wait is less about availability and more about the price settling and the network reaching your corner of the map. By the time it does, the platform on your wall will likely be more capable than the one shipping today, since the units already installed keep improving on their own. So here is the trade-off to weigh for yourself. On one side is a cheaper, plainer mini split you can buy today. It is proven, no frills, and bolted to your wall in plain sight. On the other is a heat pump that disappears into the room, runs nearly silent, holds its heat at 13 below, quietly stops warming empty rooms, and gets smarter after it is installed. It also costs more up front and ties a piece of your home's comfort to a young company's survival. Is a heat pump you actually want to look at worth paying more for and trusting a startup to stand behind for the next 15 years? Or is the safer money on a box that just works?